And again, I post these videos after those people who are not able to get the WebEx to work. So, welcome. Everyone, let's start by taking just a deep breath on this Wednesday. Breathe in, breathe out. Okay. My goal for today, I'm going to tell you what you have to do this week. I'm going to point out a few things I've put on Canvas, and then we're going to finish chapter 3. We are finishing muscles. It's going to be exciting. And then next Monday, you'll have your test. So the week ahead looks like we've got today's short lecture. On Friday, we're having a review session. I'll show you where on Canvas you can post your questions you would like to go over for the review session. Then we'll have that Friday. And then on Monday, you will take your first Canvas exam. Again, go over that as well. Okay, so what is due this week? What is due this week is your muscle worksheet. I have mine printed out and filled out by hand because I'm a crazy person who hates computers. That lifestyle is really doing well in today's age, isn't it? But feel free to submit it on Canvas. So you download the muscle worksheet, you can type in your answers, and then submit it on Canvas. A few people have printed it out, filled it out by hand, taken pictures, and submitted the pictures to Canvas. That's also fine. Either one is acceptable. What you need to know from this worksheet is not everything. You do need to know all of the muscles that are listed. You need to know all of the muscles that are listed. You need to know where you can find those muscles. Where you can find those muscles. You need to know the action of that muscle, what that muscle is responsible for moving. And then you need to know the insertions that I marked with an asterisk. You need to know the insertions I marked with an asterisk. And for that, you need to know more than just the bone. You got to tell me the landmark. So for the ones that I've marked with an asterisk, you need to be able to identify the landmark that it inserts into. So if we had been meeting today, you would have done this in class, but we're not meeting, so you have to do it online. So this is the one of the things that's due. The other thing that's going to be graded that is due Friday is your participation in the discussion board. So discussion boards will count as your attendance grade moving forward, and you have to post twice a week. So once in the something I found interesting or something I found confusing, and once in the questions. For this one, it's the muscle questions. So let's move to Canvas. I'm going to show you what is going on for Canvas. Okay, so this is the student view. Again, we have the updated syllabus here. Please make sure you read that at some point. Under helpful documents, I have information about WebEx, Wi-Fi, textbooks. I also have a link to the YouTube channel that I created. So this will take you here. Don't be confused, it's under my married name because it's with my Google account, and so my married name is Alexander. So it's me. This is my YouTube channel. It's got muscle lectures and then the lab lecture, which you don't have to watch. So you can find the one for your section and watch that if you are not able to make it to this WebEx class. Okay. Discussion boards, again, this is where your participation points come from. Post once here, things you found confusing. And post once here, you're going to answer these muscle questions. This we would have done in class, but we don't meet in class. So instead, you're doing it here. I will not grade you in correctness, just on completion. So you just have to do it. Okay. Other activities I have that are ungraded. So some ungraded helpful things here. You've got an ungraded quiz to just see how your knowledge base is going with what we're working on. This is the muscle worksheet. This one is graded. Again, muscle worksheet and the discussion boards are graded. I've got ungraded videos, so you can watch these and just see how you're doing with that. Okay, hold on, I'm gonna pull up the chat feature in case you guys have questions. If you have questions at any point, again, ask them in the chat. Okay, you got 4 videos you can watch on your own time just to help you study. And then I've got muscles in 3D and bones in 3D that I think is a helpful website, and an interactive muscle activity. So these are all things to help you. You also have the PowerPoints. Your next exam is on chapters 5 and 6. What I wanted to bring your attention to is this section here, skeletal and muscle labeling tools. So what we would have worked on in class today, if we had met in class. You would have filled this worksheet out in class in a group, and you also would have filled out all of these labeling worksheets. I know you guys are sighing, deep breath there, dodged a bullet with that one, but in class we would have done all the ones that start with a 6. 6 means chapter 6. So I want you to do, make sure you can do these. Make sure you can label where the muscles are. Everything with a chapter 6. You also might want to look at some of these other labels here for vertebrae, for skulls, bones of the hand, full skeleton. Okay, before the exam, make sure you can do all of these labeling activities. Okay. A few other things I want to draw your attention to. If you go into your assignment tab, you're going to have, again, the midterm muscle questions. You got to ask one question in the discussion board. The muscle worksheet due Friday worth 5 points. And then the other thing you'll notice is I put up questions for review. This is ungraded, but if you have topics you want me to put in the review session, if you click on this, my internet is slow, but here we go. You can submit 3 to 5 questions about chapters 5 and 6. Please submit that by Thursday at 11, and I will put together a review session for Friday. Okay, so again, that's your assignments on the discussion page. You got the 2 discussions that you should be working on, etc. Okay, I'm going to unshare my browser here. File, stop sharing. Are there any questions people have about what they should be doing this week? What's coming up? You can type them in the chat. Any questions? Once. Going twice. Okay, I'm going to switch gears then and go to the PowerPoint. So, switching gears. Go into the PowerPoint. Here we go. So, what we had left off with. We had, make sure I have the chat up. Okay. What we had left off with. This is a fun adventure. Okay, what we had left off with muscles. So your next exam, do we have to post in the discussion boards every day or just once this week? Okay, you have to post in the discussion boards twice a week. 1 time a week in the something you found interesting or confusing, and 1 per week in the like special graded discussion board for that unit. This unit is muscles. So if you've done 2 posts this week, you're all set. If you haven't done 2 posts this week, please do them by Friday. That's a good question. Any other questions? Awesome. Okay, so this next exam, chapters 5, chapter 6. Chapter 5, bones. Chapter 6, muscles. For muscles, we've talked about types of muscle tissue. We have 3 types of muscle tissue. We went into what makes them different, what is similar between them. We then went and zoomed in into the skeletal muscle. We talked about the different parts of the skeletal muscle. We drew sarcomeres. We then talked about how skeletal muscle contracts with input from a motor neuron, all the fun biology involved with muscle contraction. On Monday, we went over muscle movements. How do we move our muscles? And we generally talked about how muscles get their name, right? And the shapes that fascicles for muscles can take. Today, if we had been meeting in class, it would have been mainly group work. So today's lecture is going to be short. I'm going to briefly go over the different types of muscles that I'm expecting you to know, and we'll end with muscle development and disease. Again, I'm not going to spend time naming every single muscle I want you to know. That's what the worksheet is for, and that's what the labeling is for. In class today, I'm just going to briefly go over the different groups of muscles I'm expecting you to know, and then muscle disease. Okay. So our learning objectives for this part of the unit, we're going to learn to name the major muscles. We're going to state their action. Action is the same thing as movement. So it says movement on the column in your worksheet. That's action. You're going to label the human body diagram with the muscles. Okay. Again, I'm cluing you in here. Labeling the muscles. All of those labeling worksheets, we have an objective about labeling. You should expect to see questions on the exam where it's pointing at a muscle and it says, what muscle is this? I'm going to expect you to know what muscle that is, okay? And then describe how the major muscles contribute, work together for movement, again, action. So we start with the face muscles. Face muscles are involved with chewing and moving other parts of the face. Some of them are named for the bone that they're on. So for example, your frontalis muscle is on your frontal bone, your temporalis muscle is on your temporal bone, your zygomaticus muscle is on your zygomatic bone. Other muscles are named for what they're surrounding. So the orbiculus oculi, ocular, being eyeballs versus the orbicularis oris, oral, being mouth. And still others are named for the shape that they take. So trapezius muscles are kind of trapezoid shaped. Okay? So different muscles have different actions here on the face and neck. You have to know the muscles that you see here for your face and your neck. The one thing that's not a muscle, right, the cranial epineuroses. Epineuroses are similar to tendons. They are, tendons are rope-like connective tissue. Aponeuroses are sheet-like connective tissue. And you have one that covers the majority of your skull because you don't really have muscles. You can't really move the top of your skull. You can move your eyebrows here with your frontalis muscle. You have muscles around your ears. But the top part of your skull is covered in that connective tissue. You gotta know your upper limb muscles. So, muscles that arise from the shoulder and cross over that shoulder joint, they insert into the humerus. They're responsible for moving the whole arm. They're responsible for moving the whole arm, okay? And they do this, again, they're moving the whole arm because that's where they're inserting into the humerus. So they're moving the humerus. Muscles that enclose the humerus, however, and insert into the forearm, they move the elbow joint. And then finally, we have muscles that arise in our forearm and insert into the hand that move our wrist and our hand. I'm not going to ask you to know your forearm muscles. There are a lot of them. They've got like 5 billion names, and we're not going to worry about that. So I'm not going to ask you about the forearm muscles. Trunk muscles. So we have muscles in the trunk. That's our midsection. They're responsible for moving your column. That means the spinal column. They move the ribs. They stabilize your head and your neck and your core. You have to know your trunk muscles. You also have to know the muscles in your back. We call those your posterior trunk muscles. Again, anterior meaning front side, posterior meaning back. You have to know the muscles in the back. Okay. Muscles in the lower limb. Muscles in the lower limb are responsible for moving those joints in the lower body. So the hip, the knees, and the foot. These are some of our largest, our strongest muscles. They help us walk, they help us balance. Unlike the shoulder, which has a ton of muscles that form up like a rotator cuff, for example, and other muscles that stabilize the shoulder joint, the pelvis doesn't need stabilizing muscles. And that's because the shoulder joint is a very shallow cavity. So the glenoid cavity of the scapula is what the humerus fits into, and it's very shallow. And so the shoulder uses a lot of muscles to get its strength and stability. Whereas the hips, the cavity there is much deeper. So it's able to get by without as many stabilizing muscles, okay? And with the hips, these also span usually 2 joints, unlike with the upper arm, where they only will span just that one joint, okay? So from the posterior side, we have muscles that you need to know in the lower body, the glutes, as well as the ones that form the hamstring. You need to know the muscles that form the lower body, as well as on the anterior side, okay, the quadricep group being the biggest one, but you have a few other muscles that I'm going to ask you to know. And then on the lower leg, the anterior and the posterior side. And if you have a question about what muscle you need to know, this chart tells you right here. These are the muscles you need to know. Everything I put in the chart. You have to know them. You have to know what they do, where they are, etc. Okay, so this is the whole body from the anterior side and the posterior side. Now we're going to talk a little bit about development and disease. So the learning objectives for this unit are to describe muscular dystrophy and myasthenia gravis and explain what happens to our muscles as we age. So muscles develop early in utero. It's called quickening when the mother can feel the fetus move around, or she says, oh, the baby kicked. That can start occurring at around 16 weeks, and that's when the muscles are starting to develop. And these muscles are laid down in segments. After the child is born, their muscles will develop in a very stereotypical pattern. They'll start by having gross muscle control. Define gross meaning that they can't do little movements, but they can move the muscle big movements. That's why they give kids when they're little like really fat crayons before they can hold the little skinny crayons. That's because when they're starting out, they can't do fine motor control required to write. They have to hold the pencil like this. Okay. Muscles also develop head to toe. So the baby will first learn to hold his head up and then will learn to walk. And they're developed proximal distal. So proximal to distal. The last muscles to develop are the ones in the hands and the feet. Talk about two muscle destroying diseases. First is muscular dystrophy. This is an inherited disorder. And again, this destroys the muscles. It's thought to be caused by a problem with a dystrophin protein, which helps stabilize the sarcomere. And so if you start to break down that protein, you're not going to have the sarcomeres function, which means the muscles can't contract. And this starts at around, it's usually diagnosed around 2 to 7. So these kids will first be able to walk and move, and then will lose motor ability. And eventually they'll be confined to a wheelchair, and it's fatal in their 20s, maybe 30 if they're very lucky. And usually they die from respiratory failure. So the muscles of the diaphragm stop working and they're not able to breathe anymore. Adult onset muscle destroying disease is myasthenia gravis. This is first characterized by muscle weakness in adulthood, and so usually you'll start with muscles of the face. They'll get drooping eyelids, trouble swallowing, and talking issues. This is also causes death by respiratory failure. And for this disease, it is caused at a cellular level by a destruction of the acetylcholine receptors. So remember, acetylcholine is the signal that the motor neuron sends to the muscle, binds to those acetylcholine receptors on the sarcolemma. Well, if those receptors are gone, then there's no signal to the muscle to contract. And so as those receptors are destroyed, the muscles stop being able to contract. Okay. As we age, we all lose muscle ability. So aging muscles, they atrophy meaning destroy, and we call that sarcopenia. And this is where the muscles will decrease. You can still have connective tissue, but you overall lose body mass and muscle strength. This can be maintained to a certain extent through weight-bearing exercise. So there have been studies that have shown that old people, even if you give them little 5-pound dumbbell weights, they can still maintain and rebuild some of their muscle mass. So it's important to stay active as long as possible. Again, muscles are a use it or lose it kind of thing. So if you're not exercising, if you're not using your muscles, they're gonna atrophy. You're gonna lose them. So even as we age, we gotta maintain our exercise habits. Okay. So that is the end of the PowerPoint for Chapter 6. So again, I'm going to ask that you guys submit questions that you want me to answer in the review session Friday. Friday, I'll talk more about the exam. I'll answer any questions that people have submitted ahead of time. And then your exam is Monday, and then we will move on to the nervous system. Are there any questions people have at this point in the chat? Any questions about the material, how you're being graded? Twice. Okay, I'm going to unrecord. I'm going to stop the recording. Okay, now class.